So tonight, we're just sort of laying a foundation for how to think about adulthood and adulting. And the key to this foundation is identity. So we're going to talk about identity. Mainly, we're going to talk about how to change an identity. I think this is a foundational aspect of who you are is your identity. And weirdly, we don't talk about identity very much. In fact, when I start pointing out things about identity, I mean, everybody has an identity, but you're probably going to think, I never thought about that before. And that's just how it is. For some reason, we don't think about identity, even though that is who we are. It somehow just kind of flies in under the radar. So, to talk about identity, we have to kind of understand how we think as Westerners. And you're going to hear me talk about Western thought a lot, although not everybody in here is Western. There's a big difference between Western thought and Eastern thought, and I didn't know how incredibly Western I was in my thinking until I lived in Japan. And there were so many situations where I just assumed people would be thinking one way, and then it turned out they were thinking a completely different way, and it's because of this Western, Eastern mindset. So we, for the most part, are Western, and we have this rationalistic, materialistic worldview. And I don't mean materialistic like we go shopping all the time. It's materialistic as in all that exists is the material world that we can see and that we can measure. And so for the Western mind, being able to measure something is really important for us to feel like we understand it. So we're rationalistic, materialistic. And the way that interplays with identity is that we sort of think of identity in a action-first mindset. So identity is action-first to us. And that looks like you do, therefore you are. The things that you do determine who you are. They determine your identity. So that's action-first approach. It's like this. If I paint a whole lot, then I could say I'm a painter. The action sort of determines what my identity can be. If I take a lot of photos, and I guess they're good, there are some rules to this action first. If the photos are good, if people pay me to take them, then I am a photographer. But, kind of on the flip side of that, if I come and tell you I'm a musician, and you're like, oh, awesome, me too. Hey, what do you play? And I say, nothing. And you're like, oh, well, okay, so do you sing? Nope. Do you write music? No. Then you would say, well, you're not a musician. But what if I said, well, I'm going to do all of that stuff. I'm a musician, so I will do all of this someday. It's almost like a joke, almost. Like you would say, come on. Like you need to do musician things if you're going to say you're a musician. And the reason that makes so much sense to everybody is that you have an action-first mindset. That's just how we operate. It doesn't take a lot of explanation for us to get that one. But then there's this other way of thinking about identity, which is an identity-first mindset. And I'm calling the action-first a Western way of thinking. I don't know if identity first is an Eastern way of thinking, but I do know that it is a different way of thinking than the one I just explained. And that one is, you are, therefore you do. So your being determines your doing. All right, so the first one was, your doing determines your being. I paint a lot, therefore I'm a painter. The other one would be, I'm a painter, therefore I paint. Identity first, causing the action. And so to me, I feel like this is sort of like Mr. Miyagi kind of thing, or like the peach tree will always make peaches because it's a peach tree, which I think is a paraphrase from Kung Fu Panda, which my daughter knows is my favorite movie. No, it's my favorite movie that I'm going to watch with her. We have to watch cartoons, you know. So tonight we're going to explore this identity-first mindset. Really, we're going to talk about both of them, But it's this identity first mindset that I think has something really rich to offer, but we don't think that way a lot of the time. So let's look at adulting through those lenses. So raise your hand if you've ever used the hashtag adulting tag for anything you've posted. Well, I haven't, but I really felt like it. Just 3 people? All right. And then one in the back. So what did you tag with hashtag adulting?
I think I was just the DMV.
The DMV. Yeah. What did you tag?
I got a printer for Christmas and I was
Okay.
excited.
DMV. She got a printer for Christmas is what she said. So, and Jordan, what did you do that was hashtag adulting?
Bought an alarm clock, like a physical alarm.
Yes. I haven't ever posted hashtag adulting on anything, but I have thought that many times. Like, I remember thinking that when I was taking my wife, you're going to think this is crazy, taking my wife to the baby doctor appointment for the first time. I was like, this is what adults do. And I was already having a baby. And then I was like, wow, this is what adults would do. So here's the definition of adulting from a Twitter user whose handle is TBH Adulting. And everything that they post about is just adulting. And adulting is to do grown-up things, hold responsibilities such as a 9-to-5 job, a mortgage, a car payment, or anything else that makes one think of grown-ups. And I just think that definition is like so perfect, because if you use the word grown-ups, you're either an adult talking to a child, or you feel like a child talking about the grown-ups. The grown-ups are coming. So the hashtag adulting phenomenon exists because, like I said, we are a doing first mindset, and we as millennials, and I do consider myself a millennial. I was born in the very year that most of those what is a millennial things say millennials that started in. So I do consider myself a millennial, but millennials don't know when we become adults. We don't really have a defining now you're an adult moment. And so we post adulting posts, or like me, we think things like, wow, this is what an adult would do. Because our identity is not adult. If someone feels like an adult, they're not going to post hashtag adulting. If my dad posted, filed my taxes for the 57th year in a row, hashtag adulting, it would be weird. Because he identifies, his identity is an adult, so he doesn't use the hashtag. So if you use the hashtag, it means you feel like you're something else other than an adult doing adult things. And even though few people raised their hands, I know, I didn't raise my hand for it, but I've had that thought. And it's because I didn't feel like an adult. I felt like something else doing an adult thing. So you can see why identity is really key here. So we don't know when we become adults because we don't have anything like a rite of passage into adulthood. And I would say most rationalistic societies don't really have a hard, fast rite of passage into adulthood. If you're thinking, you know what, my dad sat me down or my mom sat me down and said, today you're an adult. If you're thinking that, then I think that is awesome, but I think you're in the vast minority of people. That I think probably most of us Westerners, because our parents think the same way. You're an adult when you do your adult things. So as I was looking up rites of passage on a very scholarly source, BuzzFeed.com. Actually, no, sorry, this is list25.com, but it's the same thing. So it's basically everything is just a list of 25 things. So this was like 25 bizarre rites of passage, and I got some highlights here. So we got naked cow running. So this is a ceremony that was done with boys in this one tribe someplace to welcome him into manhood, to say, today you're a man. He would be stripped naked in front of all of his friends and whipped by the elders of the community. And then they would line up a bunch of cows, 4 castrated cows, and he would run across their backs. He's a man. The Mandan Okipa people, dang, I wish I had written where these were. Anyway, this one's a lot worse. Boys have to fast for 4 days without sleeping. And on the 5th day, the boys are taken into a hut where wooden skewers are forced into their chests, sort of in that like hook through, like piercing, and they're hoisted up by those hooks, and they have to smile the whole time until they pass out. And then they have to, when they wake up, it's not done, they have to cut their little fingers off to offer as some sort of sacrifice to the spirits, and then someone pronounces, "You're a man," and they are now adults.
Where is that, Justin?
Look it up on list25.com. Just the Mandan Okipa people. There's the Maasai people of Tanzania. They go out on a hunting trip and kill a lion with a spear. Native American tribes, it's kind of common that they would send their boys into the wilderness to fend for themselves for a matter of time. In the Ogiek people, the boys and girls would, and this is in Kenya, paint themselves white with clay and live in seclusion for months while being hunted by the people of their tribe. I don't know if they're like being hunted to be killed or something like that. I think it sounded more like it was some kind of, like they're trying to scare them real bad. Anyway, after these ceremonies in these various places, the children become adults. Their identity is changed. So we in the West have something, or used to have something like this. In Mexican culture, we have the quinceañera, which is for girls at 15. And raise your hand if you had a quinceañera.
No.
No? Yeah?
They made me take pictures.
Okay.
There are pictures.
All right. So the girl wears a out of this world like humongoid dress, and all of the young boys wear tuxes for the first time, and they go to the mall and they take pictures, right?
I didn't go to the mall.
Where'd you go?
I went to Walmart.
Yes.
We just have a mall in my hometown.
Oh, that's just too good. So afterward, nobody really expects that the 15-year-old girl is now an adult. And in kind of general American culture, we have the Sweet 16 party, also for girls, which I think a long time ago was a introduction into now I'm marriageable age. But now it's basically just a glorified birthday party where the girl dresses up and I don't know. I didn't have any sisters, so I don't even know what a Sweet 16 party looks like, except for what the movies tell me. So these are just glorified birthday parties, and no one expects them to be adults afterward, because in the West we sort of reject the rites of passage because they're not rational. Nothing about running across cows makes you an adult. It's not an adult thing. It's just a ceremony, and then afterwards someone says, now you're an adult. And the fact that we don't have these rites of passage basically sort of leave us to figure out when we become adults. And so we end up making lots of huge life decisions from an identity of, well, I'm not an adult. I don't feel like an adult. So you might be making these decisions from the very same place you made all your decisions as a kid. Just whatever's easiest, pleasure first, or fear of failure. I'm just an immature kid. What do I know? Yet we're making all these incredibly important life decisions. But there are at least two, I think there are probably more, but there are at least two things that we do in the West that are identity change ceremonies. They're irrational, but they work. So what I want to kind of get across right now is that an identity can change like that with something as simple as a pronouncement. An identity can change. And we have this in our culture. So picture this, a single dude. Well, I guess he's not single if he's dating. So a guy who's dating a young lady is living in a house with a bunch of guys, and they have no decorations anywhere, and he just eats what he scrounges up. I'm basically just describing my own bachelorhood. And then one day, this bachelor goes to a church and a pastor says, I now pronounce you husband and wife. And after that, if he were to go and just walk back into his old bachelor pad with his roommates and try to bed down for the night, it would be like, that's too weird. What are you doing? Like, come on. You're not this anymore. Your identity has changed. It's expected for him to be a husband at that point. Now, the fact that a lot of guys go crashing and burning back into their kind of bachelor mindset is not that identity change doesn't work. It's that we struggle with sin laying heavy weights on people. But the fact is, this identity changing ceremony, it does work. One day he's a bachelor, the next day he's a husband, and suddenly doing bachelor things are out of character. Now that's the irrational thing. But up until that pronouncement of marriage, he hasn't done anything husbandly necessarily. He hasn't earned his status as husband by doing actions. It's a ceremony, and a change happens. And there's another one that all of you have likely gone through, and that is, I'll set it up like this, or I'll ask this question. What is the first day of your life where it would have been really awkward and weird to hang out at a high school? The moment you graduate. You do a ceremony. Until that ceremony, you haven't done anything graduately. Everything you've done has been high school or younger. But then suddenly, it would be weird to go back and just hang around at your high school. Why? Because your identity has changed, and we all know that. We can all see how that works, that identity does change, and it can change through a pronouncement, through the kind of collective ceremonial, now we're changing to something else. So why don't we have anything like that for adulthood? Perhaps the graduation from high school used to be that, but now we've sort of created this prolonged time of not having to really think of yourself as an adult. So now we've lost that ceremony as an opportunity to launch us into the adult identity. So now we graduate, we go off to college, we live alone, we have romantic relationships, we plan what we're going to do with the rest of our lives, and we feel like non-adults. So imagine if somebody were to grab you and just say, today you're an adult. Your identity has changed. I didn't have anything like that. I had a fantastic childhood, and my dad is an awesome dad, but I didn't get a pronouncement of adulthood. And I don't know if I can just wave my hand over you and pronounce you adults tonight, but I believe in identity change. And the fact that we as Westerners sort of don't think about identity change very much is really sad, because identity change is such an immense part of Christianity. Christianity requires an identity change. But since we don't think in those terms, we sort of end up running this race of, I have to do Christian things to be a Christian. So fortunately, there's no hashtag Christianing. But I think we wind up in a similar place in our minds of I have to do these actions to become that thing. And we do those actions from a mindset of, I'm not that thing yet. So when I was preparing this, I kind of thought, here's where the sermon is going to land. But once I got here, I just realized, whoa, wait a minute. Like, there's something so much deeper going on than just how do you be an adult. We're talking about identity change, something deep, something powerful, and I want to put myself on the line tonight to say that I believe that identity can change tonight. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. Don't put them up just yet, but I'm going to show you some pictures from a mission trip that I took to Zambia, where I got to see an identity change happen in a really powerful way. And I think in a room this size, somebody is going to connect with this boy that I'm going to show you about directly. I think somebody's going to directly connect with exactly what his issue was that he was dealing with. But then on a larger scale, I think you're going to connect kind of in general with having an identity that you can tell is hurting you. So this may open a nice big can of worms, but that's good. I want to open a can of worms. So Laws, will you put the first picture up there? All right, so this is Dalton on the left, Salinala on the in the middle, Salinella, I think, actually, and yours truly. So you can kind of see around his neck that he's wearing a necklace. What you can't see is that it has his name on it in beads kind of hanging down. And his name is Salinella. And that means worthless. I could tell from the very beginning that he just had this like heaviness on him. Laws, will you throw up the next picture? That this is the best that he could do when he was asked to smile. So he prayed for forgiveness. He prayed that Jesus would come into his life and save him. And I was just like, Salinella, would you want us to change your name? And he told the translator, yes. Dalton told me, hey, if we take the S off of his name and call him Alinella, that means worthy. And so I was like, let's do it. So we laid hands, prayed, and pronounced in the name of Jesus, your name is Alinella. So he was this kid all the way till Thursday. And then we went to a mountaintop for the last day. And we took this one picture of Alinella, worthy. And he just looks like a regular kid. And that is just not who he was the whole rest of the week until this thing changed. And I believe that we pronounced something powerfully over him and his identity changed. He became worthy. His identity changed. And so I'm going to read a couple of scriptures. And I suspect that some of you feel exactly like him, worthless. Like that your identity that you came in here with is, I'm worthless and I'm like him. I'm trying to do the things that everybody else is doing to feel like them, and you just feel like it's just not working. And on another hand, a similar hand, perhaps you don't feel worthless. Perhaps you feel like I'm trying to do this Christian thing, but I'm just doing the stuff. I don't feel any different. I identify as something else. And so I'm going to read these scriptures, and you just weigh these in your heart and see if this is how you feel, if this is your identity. So this first one is 1 Peter 2:9. So you can look that up. The second one's going to be John 1:12. I'll give you a second to write it or look it up. 1 Peter 2:9 and John 1:12. So 1 Peter 2:9 says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people." So look at all the different identities in there. You're a chosen race, a royal priesthood. That's big time. Royalty and priesthood, you're a royal priesthood. You're a holy nation, a people of his own possession. So you are the possession of God, that you may proclaim his excellencies. Those are big identities. And then this other one is, once you were not a people of God, but now you are a people of God. There are 5 pretty intense identities that you can expect to be. That's who you are as a Christian. So the question is not, do you believe that? The question is, do you feel like that's your identity? And then John 1:12. "But to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." So to believe in him gives you the right to become children of God. And so a Christian asks for forgiveness and is baptized in this ceremonial sort of, now you're a Christian. Now you have a new identity. And those identities you can find reading the scripture. Here are 6 of them. And this last one, a child of God. But a big killer among us is this identity of an orphan, the opposite of the child, the one who's possessed by God. The orphan, feeling like you have to fend for yourself, feeling like Alinella, like he had to steal food from his own house to eat. And so my question is, what is your identity? And what I want to do tonight is I want to put myself on the line, I guess. I don't really feel like it's putting me on the line. I feel like it's maybe putting God on the line to say, if you feel like you've got an identity that you know is not the one that you should have, not the one that you want, one that's eating you up, then I want to pray for you tonight to receive a different identity. And I think it's going to happen. You know, you don't have to be a part of too many of these kind of stories to say, man, I want to see that more. Like, that is what I want. So I want to pray for somebody for identity tonight. And maybe you don't want to come to me and ask for that. That's fine. We're going to break up into groups. And if you're still like hashing through this stuff, bring it up in the group. The group leader will just kind of stir the pot, so to say, so you can talk about these things. They have some questions about identity that they may ask, or if you're just thinking something and you want to talk about it, you can bring that up in the group. But I'm a believer that identity can change. I've seen it happen, and I want it to happen, and I want you guys to walk in an identity, not just an adult identity, but an identity of a child of God, an identity of the royal priesthood, the people called, people possessed by God. I want you to walk in those identities. Life is better that way when you're living in the right identity. You don't need to feel like a Christian doing the Christian, an orphan doing the Christian stuff, trying to become a child of God. That's an identity change that can happen. So we're going to pray for that tonight.